just to paint the big picture here, Deuteronomy, you recall, it's just because Josh almost certainly did put maps in front of me because he's not into that kind of thing. But I go with maps. So remember, this is Moses' what I call the locker room speech before they go out on the playing field. And so here they are gathered on the other side of the Jordan Valley. There's the region of Moab. They're just about to go down, cross over right in the north of the Dead Sea and right at Jordan. And so all of these references, just to remind you, all of these references to land. Anytime Moses is saying, like, in the land God sent you to, and the land that's right over there, visually how the scene set up is that they're like looking, like they can see it. It's just right there. They're in this really high hill country, and then a big drop, and then a river valley, and then just the hill country of the land that's promised to Abraham. So that's the setting that's going to be relevant for both chapter 7 and 8. So we're in this block of Deuteronomy, which is one of my personal favorites, because it's a little collection of sermons or sermonettes. If you read them each one aloud, they don't last about 5 minutes each, but they're little sermonettes. He told the backstory of the covenant. He's going to reinforce the laws and the terms of the covenant relationship with Yahweh. And then it's begun by a bunch of little covenant sermons and actually kind of ended in very similar way to it. So this is the second where we are right now. So basically Moses is doing everything he can to persuade them that following Torah and being faithful to the covenant is the best possible thing for them. And it's going to require dedication, it's going to require obedience, sacrifice, and intentionality, but it is actually the way to life for Israel as the covenant people. That's the argument that he's trying to make. Now, he knows full well that they're going to be incapable of doing any of that, but he won't get there until the end of the book. So throughout the whole of the book up here, he's like making this case that he really seems to think that they're capable of being faithful to the covenant. And so he's going to lay all of that out, only to come to the very end and say, but actually, you and I both know how this is going to go. And so then that's where he talks about God's going to have to circumcise their hearts, do something fundamentally to change their hearts so that they can be faithful to the covenant. But that's not until I don't know, August or something like that. So don't even worry about that right now. Anyway, so Deuteronomy chapter 7. Okay, ready? And rock? Okay. It's actually not the most pleasant way to get in chapters and subject matter here, but here we go. So when Yahweh your God brings you into the land that you are entering to possess, and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you are. And when Yahweh your God has delivered them over to you, you've defeated them, you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them. Anybody have a different translation for treaty? Covenant, that's exactly right. Don't make any covenant. Yahweh's made a covenant with you, so don't betray that by making a covenant with these other nations. Show them no mercy. Don't intermarry with them. Don't give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, or they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. Yahweh's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Remember, Asherah was a Canaanite fertility goddess, and they would put these poles on top of the hills and then have ritual sacrifices and orgies and stuff like that to worship her. So, Asherah poles, and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to Yahweh your God. Yahweh your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. Now, let's pause for a moment here. Hey guys, doing? It's a pleasant thought. I'm watching it. I can't think of too many things that could be more politically incorrect than a paragraph like what we just read, right? So here's a way you could, I think misread or whatever. You could just read a passage like this. So, okay, you have God's chosen people whom he loves, and they're supposed to go take away this land from other people and kill them all, and destroy all of their religious artifacts. That just sounds horrible. You know what I'm saying? On the surface of it, it really does. And we've talked about this theme already of Yahweh's justice Yahweh bringing his justice on the Canaanites, and this is really early to be thinking about this topic, but it's going to keep presenting itself to us. You guys remember that? Maybe a month and a half, if you were apart, we actually spent a whole morning just working through the difficulties of this topic in terms of your theology and God's justice and so on. So I don't want to rehash all that again. I think that was after we started recording, even. So that might be, but I don't remember. Anyway, so here's a couple things. Look at verse 2. You see this after you've defeated them. When the Lord your God has delivered them, after you've defeated them, you must do what to them? What does it say? And then he has destroy totally. Any other translations? We all have that. Complete destruction. Nobody has the word devoted. Oh, some of you did. Yeah, okay. How does that read? Oh, devote them to complete destruction. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's about the same. So destroy completely. The word devote is getting to the heart of what this term is about. So in Hebrew, this term is, the noun is called cherem, the verb is called haram. And some of you might have a footnote about that little phrase. Do you have something about that? Yeah, a little footnote. At least it's telling you this is a technical term. It's a Hebrew term used to irrevocable giving over of things or persons to Yahweh. Often, but not always, by totally destroying them. So it's a word that was used for Israel when it engaged in war, not with any nation in general. It was actually a very small group of people groups that they were engaged with this, namely specific nations living in the land. And here's what's very interesting. Is if you actually then go out from here to read the stories, there's actually very few nations that Israel ever did this with. It was practiced with Jericho. It was practiced with the nation of Midian, which is where we covered this back at the end of Numbers. It was practiced one other time in a battle with Saul and the Amalekites. And in each of those cases, they are, well, especially with Midian and the Amalekites, they were actually nations that were on the offensive against Israel, and so this was the way they were to respond. And so, not all of Israel's battles were like this. It's just a select group of peoples, and it's specifically these nations here living in the land. Now, the word destroy totally makes you think destroy totally. But this passage is actually really significant, because so look at verse 3. So you've destroyed them totally, but then make no covenants or treaties with them. Well, why on earth do you need to say that if you destroyed them totally? Verse 3, don't intermarry with them. Well, why on earth do you need to say that if you've destroyed them totally? So, the point, does that make sense? Does that basic point make sense? So, that should alert us that we're dealing with the preacher right now. And part of the rhetoric and the way of speaking of Deuteronomy, he is impassioned. And so, it's one of those things where if you read in context, you think destroy totally. That seems to mean destroy totally. But making a blanket statement about how drastically important this issue of separation from the Canaanites is. And so, there are going to be moments where they destroy them totally, but they should always, always be super wary of creating boundaries between themselves and the Canaanites. Does that make sense? Just that basic point. So, we're not going to take time to move towards the issue of the destruction of the Canaanites. We did that a while ago, and we'll do it again. But just to make that point here, even in this own paragraph, it shows you that destroy totally doesn't necessarily mean destroy totally. And I'm not trying to evade something. I'm just saying, apparently they're still there to intermarry with afterwards, which means that destroy totally is a figure of speech, so to speak. Does that make sense at that point? Okay. All right. So, why? Why are we doing this? We're doing this because of verse 6. You are a people holy to Yahweh your God. Yahweh's chosen you out of all the peoples. Now, we're alluding back to a moment in the story here. Yahweh's chosen you from among all the peoples. What moments in the story are we alluding back to here? Key moments. When did Yahweh choose you out of all the nations to be his people? Sorry. Two key moments that we focused on. One is God's conversation with that random guy Abraham, and said, "I'm going to bless you and make you into a nation, because through you, what? Through you, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed." So God chooses one family to bless all families. And then Exodus 19 was the key moment where they first stepped foot on Mount Sinai. And we've gone this passage many, many times, but it's really good to keep doing it. So this is the beginning of the whole covenant relationship. And God said to the people, he said, "If you obey me fully, if you keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be mine." Do you see this word right there? Treasured possession. It's exactly the word that Moses uses right here in Deuteronomy chapter 7. And so we're alluding back to this moment of the covenant here. And so what God's saying is, listen, all nations belong to me. It's not that I don't care about all nations, but I'm choosing you as a nation to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, which is exactly what he says here. You are a holy people to your God. So this is reminding us of the whole story of what God's doing with Israel. He's calling them to be separate and distinct from among the nations, not because he doesn't care about the rest of the nations. It actually is because he cares about the rest of the nations. And he's going to shape this people through proximity to him and through giving them the Torah so that they become a kingdom of priests. People who, through their life together, will show the other nations the character and the purposes of Yahweh. So for the Canaanites, as we're going to see, the argument, at least in Deuteronomy, is that they've become so morally corrupt and they've so defiled this land that God's holiness is going to be, Israel is going to become a kingdom of priests by showing these nations God's holiness and justice and bringing judgment upon them. But it's specifically for this group of people. For other nations, they're to show Yahweh's justice and generosity and bring blessing to them and so on. So that's the logic of how all of this works here. So one nation as priests for all nations. That's the logic here. So it's not that Yahweh hates other nations, it's actually precisely that he wants to, in the long term, bring his blessing and show who he is to the nations, and that's why he asked Israel to do what he's doing. Now this raises the question, why did Yahweh choose this particular family and this particular nation? I mean, there must be something admirable about these people that Yahweh would choose them, and he may even use them as these agents of judgment on other nations and so on. There must be something really incredible about these people. No, not at all. Not at all. Look at verse Yahweh did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples. Actually, you were like the smallest of all people groups. Rather, it was because Yahweh loved you and kept the oath that he swore to your forefathers, that he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Know, therefore, that Yahweh, your God, that he is God. He is the faithful God. He keeps his covenant love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commands. But to those who hate him, he'll repay to their face by destruction. He won't be slow to repay to their face those who hate him. Okay, let's pause. Deuteronomy is like this. It has like the most heartwarming, you want to like cross-stitch it, and put it on your wall type verses, and then right next to them are other ones that are like, whoa, kind of forget. So look at verses 7 and 8. This is one of the most astounding statements about God's love. Oh, I think I mentioned this once before. But Deuteronomy has the word love in it more than any other book of the Bible. Did I mention that way back when? And it's especially in these sections right here. These are the love chapters. So look at verse 7. So why did Yahweh choose Israel as a family and a nation to work through? Was it because they were like admirable and incredible and a large and influential nation? And the answer is no. So that would raise the question, why? Verse 7 says, the Lord didn't set his affection on you for that reason. So verse 8 tells you what the real reason is. And what is the real reason? It was because what? It was because the Lord loved you. Now stop and put those together. This is so verse 7. He didn't set his affection on you because of X, that is that you're a big influential nation. Rather, here's the reason. It's because what? What does it say in verse 8? Because what? Because he loves you. Why does Yahweh love these people? Because he loves them. Do you see that? This is really beautiful. Why did he set his affection on them? Because he loves them. But why does he love them? Because he loves them. But why does he love them? But, verse 7 and 8 is this little merry-go-round that you'll never get off of. And so this is beautiful. And it's precisely, like destruction of the Canaanites, well, that's a punch in the face on Wednesday morning. But then, the whole point is that and why does he love anybody in general? Why does he love this nation? Because he actually wants to use this nation as a vehicle for his blessing and to show who he is to all nations. And why does he do that? Why does he do that to a world of people who've rejected him and who are ruining each other and so on? That's just who Yahweh is. Which doesn't mean he won't bring justice on human evil. What it does mean is that he has his own covenant promises that he's going to redeem and rescue no matter what happens. And at any given generation, to those who love him and keep his commands, will experience the blessing of his covenant love. And to those who refuse, they reject, or they want to, in this case of the Canaanites, oppress or attack God's covenant people, will bring justice on them. It's really profound. Why does Yahweh keep his covenant? Because he's loving. Well, why does he love you? Because that's just who he is. That's the logic here. Verse 11. take care to follow the commands and the decrees and the laws that I'm giving you today. If you pay attention to these laws, and if you're careful to follow them, then Yahweh your God will keep his covenant of love with you as he swore to your forefathers. He will love you, bless you, increase your numbers. Any other translations of that phrase, increase your numbers? Multiply. Yeah, is that language ringing a bell? Multiply, increase in numbers. So that was all the way back to the promise given to humanity in Genesis 1, and then on to Abraham and so on. And it's always connected with blessing. He will bless the fruit of your womb, the crops of your land, your grain, your new wine, your oil, the calves of your herds, the lambs of your flocks, and the land that he swore to your forefathers to give you. You'll be blessed more than any other people. None of your men or women will be childless, nor will any of your livestock go without young. Yahweh will keep you free from every disease. He will not inflict on you the horrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on those who hate you. You must destroy all the peoples Yahweh your God gives over to you. Don't look on them with pity. Don't serve their gods, for that will be a snare to you. Now you might say to yourselves, oh, hold on a second. These nations are way stronger than we are. How can we drive them out? Don't be afraid. This is the other key thing here. Even though, so you have this command to destroy them completely, but then you have this other theme that's set alongside it that goes back to the Exodus, which is, if Israel's not a very large, powerful, influential people, how on earth are they going to survive in this sea of powerful nations that they're going into? And the whole point is, well, like, you can't, and you won't be able to. So just sit back, just like you did at the Red Sea, and just watch how Yahweh will work things out for you. Which is exactly what he says here. Verse 18, don't be afraid. Remember well what Yahweh your God did to Pharaoh and to all of Egypt. You saw with your own eyes the great trials, the miraculous signs and wonders, the mighty hand, the outstretched arm with which Yahweh your God brought you out. Do you feel the preacher in Moses here? The signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, the outstretched arm, he just piles it all up. It's great. He's getting his preach on here. Moreover, Yahweh your God will... this is interesting. Verse 20. Moreover, Yahweh your God will send something. Do you translate to 10? Some of you have hornets. Others of you have pestilence. This is an extremely it's a rare word. It's a rare word. It's a rare word, and there's disputes about what it means. I think pestilence or fear or terror or something is more likely what it means, because this would be the only case of God sending a hive of hornets on somebody. I mean, it's a metaphor, almost certainly, but even so. God will send hornets or terror or pestilence or something among them until even the survivors who hide from you have perished. Don't be terrified. For Yahweh, your God, who is among you, He's a great and awesome God. Yahweh will drive those nations out before you, little by little. You're not going to be allowed to eliminate all the nations at once, or else the wild animals will multiply around you. This is an interesting little theme that appears again. So if you do this blitzkrieg and then the whole land belongs to you, it's going to take you months and months and months to settle in the different areas, and it's going to be taken over by lions by them, So it's just going to be a little, or cougars. But Yahweh, your God, will deliver them over to you, throwing them into great confusion until they are destroyed. Just what he did to the armies of Pharaoh when they were crashing in on Israel at the Red Sea. He'll give their kings into your hand. You'll wipe out their names from under heaven. No one will be able to stand up against you. You'll destroy them. The images of their gods you are to burn in the fire. Don't covet their silver or gold. Don't take it for yourselves, or you'll be ensnared by it. It's detestable to Yahweh advantage or plunder from these wars at all. It's not like Yahweh just says, okay, and here's all their gold and silver. The whole point is that they don't benefit at all. All they are is instruments of Yahweh. They bring His justice, and then they turn everything over and devote it to Yahweh or get rid of it. So it's a part of these firm boundary lines between Israel and the Canaanites, and it's not for their own selfish advantage. Does that make sense? So here's a couple thoughts just as I was thinking about this. I don't know. Josh mentioned this wonderful commentary we're reading on Deuteronomy after this. So it's by Christopher Wright, and he had some really, really good insights here, thinking about what does a passage like this speak to God's people, as the generations go on. Because at this stage in covenant history, the whole idea of the chosen people is that God has formed them as an ethnic family and as a nation. And so nations by nature have, pretty clear tribal ethnic boundary lines. And God's attached His name, His revelation of who He is to this particular family back here. And we live at a stage in the covenant story where Yahweh's identity is no longer tied to any one particular tribe or ethnic people group. Right? I mean, that's the entire point of the gospel and of the book of Acts about Jew and non-Jew coming together as the covenant family. So, that just changes the game completely, right? Because if I'm a Christian, if I even have enemies in the first place, what am I no longer to do to them? Kill them. In fact, what am I to do to them precisely the opposite? And this was the upside-down kingdom that Jesus introduced. I'm actually to love these people, even if their will is, dead set against me or for my harm. But does that mean that God's people are to no longer see themselves as set apart or unique, and that we're supposed to have really clear boundary lines as we look around the culture with us? And actually, if you read into the New Testament, the boundary lines are about as clear as they are right here, right? So here's a very interesting passage, just as an example of how this works out in the New Testament. In 1 Peter chapter 2. And look at the language that he uses here. It's very interesting. 1 Peter chapter 2. And he's writing to Christians here, Jewish and non-Jewish Christians. He says, "But you all are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." Have I heard these words before? So Peter is just taking all these words out of Deuteronomy 7 and Exodus 19. And here's the point. Why? Why are you chosen and holy and selected? So that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. Now there was a time when you were not a people, but now you all are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So, dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. So there is a form of warfare still. And it's this what Paul called, the battle between the flesh and the spirit, or what he calls the battle of sin that's warring against our very lives. Live such good lives among the pagans that even though they might accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that He visits us. Do you see, he's taken the same mindset, but this new stage in the covenant and the upside-down kingdom has changed out all of the realities. But you still have a people who set apart and distinct and different, and who, at certain points, especially on morally, declare clear boundary lines that set us apart, but not to make us feel good about ourselves. It's all for bearing witness to who God is, so that people could see how awesome Jesus is. That's the whole point. Does that make sense? How that works itself out? So within that framework, then, a passage like Deuteronomy 7, I think, takes on a kind of renewed challenge to us that we are to really take seriously. Holiness. Because holiness is how God's people, one of the ways God's people accomplish their mission, is to say we're living out a different vision of what it means to be human beings together as a way of witnessing to the nations. So those are my thoughts on Deuteronomy 7. That's about as good as I can do at 6:30 in the morning. Let's read the next sermon because it's shorter and it's also awesome as well. So, as the people go into the land, the Canaanites are an external threat to them. One of the ways they could betray their identity as God's people and ruin the whole plan is to give in to this external threat. But there's also an internal danger that could ruin the whole thing. Chapter 8. Be careful to follow every command that I'm giving you today, so that you may live. Obedience leads to life. It's a basic math equation in Deuteronomy. So that you may live and increase, and may enter and possess the land that Yahweh promised on oath to your forefathers. Remember how Yahweh your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years, to humble you, testing you, in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, letting you go hungry and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, to teach you that humans do not live on bread alone, but rather on every word that proceeds from the mouth of Yahweh. You heard that line before? You have heard it before. We'll talk about that. Your clothes did not wear out. Your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines a son, so Yahweh your God disciplines you. So we're reflecting back on the wilderness period. You're about to go into the land, and as we're going to see, if they obey, it's going to be full of abundance and really awesome stuff. But never forget these lean years of trial and testing. Because if you think that Yahweh is good to you in the good times, it could cause you to forget that Yahweh was just as good to you in the lean, difficult times as well, shaping and doing different things in you. Now, this is really interesting. Look at verse 2. So remember how he led you all the way in the desert, 40 years, to humble you and to test you. And do you remember in some of the stories, the wilderness stories, where Israel complained and so on, and Yahweh said, why are you guys testing me? Right? That was the whole thing. Is they thought they were testing him, but here Yahweh reveals, actually, I was the one testing you. And so, we may not like this, but this is a motif that appears in numerous places throughout the Bible, is that there are some times, not all the time, there are some times where God will allow or bring times of testing and difficulty into the lives of his people, precisely because he loves them. That's not something we like to hear. And it's something that can easily be misunderstood, too, because then we can come to think that somehow every tragedy or bad thing that might enter our life is Yahweh, trying to teach us a lesson or something. But the Bible doesn't say that either. There's also other things that can just happen to us that they're not God's will as such. They're someone else's sinful will. God can redeem that and turn that into something redemptive in our lives, but it doesn't mean that he sent this personally to teach you a lesson or something like that. Yahweh's not trying to teach you a lesson all the time, but there may be times, and it's difficult to discern what those times are. And the time of the wilderness was one of these times. And so look at verse 3. This is the whole point. What was Yahweh trying to sit at that line and have a cup of tea and just think about that. So, because can humans live on bread? Well, you're like, well, you need vegetables, something like. But the whole bread here is I think a figure of speech for food. Can human beings live just on food and water? The answer is yes. So what on earth does that mean? What do you mean man can't live on bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God? So here's Israel. They were in a time where they actually didn't have enough even physical food. And so what they came to see was they were utterly dependent on the covenant relationship with Yahweh to give them not only their physical food, but to give them hope and meaning that their story was going somewhere, that their lives had purpose. And so here, we're teaching them this lesson that human life is more than just subsistence living. It's more than just scraping by existence. That actually what we need to truly flourish and live and become humans is God's Word, which gives us a story to live within, and meaning, and hope, and purpose. And it's kind of like, you guys remember that educator Abraham Maslow? He had that hierarchy of needs. And that what human beings, ants just live on bread alone, and they're just fine with that. But human beings need a lot more than bread to flourish as human beings, right? So we need food, shelter, clothing is the basics, but that's the bottom of the pyramid. Then it's like stable relationships and social network and safety net. And then at the top of the pyramid are all about their existential issues, about meaning and purpose and meaningful work, that my life has significance, and that I do things to discover who I am and self-actualization and so on. Now, that's kind of a humanistic way of framing it. But he has his thumb on something really important about human beings, that we're more than just animals. And I think that something like that is what Moses is saying here. He led them through this time of testing to strip away even the physical provision of Israel, to remind them of who they really are and who Yahweh really is. And that it's his covenant promises, his love, and the journey he has them on, his promises to them, that make life what it really is, of significance and meaning. This is very profound. Verse 3 is worth, still go have a cup of tea and think about it. But it's quite profound. That's the best I can do at 6:45 in the morning. Okay, verse 6. This is where the sermonette really picks up. Observe the commands of Yahweh your God, walking in his ways and revering him. Yahweh your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in the valleys and the hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron and you can dig copper out of the hills. Who wants to go live there? Pomegranates, pick along the trees. Now, when you have eaten and when you are satisfied, praise Yahweh your God for the good land he has given you. So when you're in, these were the lean times, and Yahweh was shaping your character in really deep ways. But then there are other times of abundance. And when you're in times of abundance, make sure that you are constantly engaging in practices of gratefulness and thankfulness and praise. And that sufficiency generates praise. Be careful, he says, verse 11, be careful that you don't forget Yahweh your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I'm giving you today. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build your fine houses and you settle down, when your herds and your silver and gold increase, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now notice there's a parallel here that I think is really, really powerful. So notice he says, here in verse 10, he says, when you eat and are satisfied. But also in verse 12, he says, when you eat and are satisfied. And what's the difference between these two? In verse 10, you eat and are satisfied, and that should lead to what? In verse 10. Praise, right? Which you kind of flesh out a little more. Gratefulness, right? Thanksgiving. Verse 12 envisions a scenario that when you eat and are satisfied, and you get all this good stuff, and then what happens? What's the end result of that? Not praise, but not pride. There's something that happens before pride. You forget. You're eating or satisfied, fine houses, silver and gold increase. Oh, excuse me. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're right. All right, sorry. I'm getting my preach on here. Your heart will become proud when you forget. So, pride, forgetfulness. Now that in and of itself, I think is significant. That times of abundance, both of which that are gifts from Yahweh. The whole point is that eating and being satisfied is a gift from Yahweh. But they can lead, the gift of Yahweh can lead to something really good, or the gift can actually lead to something that's bad for us. Or at least it can arouse something bad within us. And it all depends on our response to it and how we constantly frame it. It can lead to gratefulness and thanksgiving, or it can lead to pride and forgetfulness. Now, why would we become proud, and forgetful? Verse 15. So listen, he led you through the vast and dreadful desert, that thirsty and waterless land with its snakes and scorpions. He brought water out of the hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the desert, something your fathers had never known, to humble and test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. It's as if he's saying, listen, I was shaping within you this heart of dependence and gratefulness so that when you came into the good land, you wouldn't just take it all for granted, that you would recognize it as a gift of what it is. But if you become proud and forget, verse 17, then you might say to yourself, well, wow, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember, Yahweh your God, for He's the one who gives you the ability to produce wealth. And in so doing, He's confirming His covenant that He swore to your forefathers, just as it is today. So pride and forgetfulness makes you think essentially that you are self-sufficient. And when you're self-sufficient, you forget the fact that your very life is a gift. You forget that the air that you breathe, the ruach, the spirit that God grants to animate your life, that's an entire gift. That whatever health that you may have, that's a gift. The circumstances that you're in to produce and generate income, to provide for yourself and for those you're responsible for, that's all a complete gift. The whole idea is that even everything that I have is another gift, which is his way of framing what a selfish and short-sighted response that this is. And so, verse 19, if you, Israel, here we are back into the story here. If Israel, you forget Yahweh your God, and then blow it up bigger, if you follow other gods, back to chapter 7, if you worship and bow down to them, I testify the nations Yahweh destroyed before you, you'll be destroyed for not obeying Yahweh your God. Now, reading verses like 19 and 20, as Christians, we should not read this and go, oh, I should be thankful that I have a job, otherwise Jesus is going to kill me. So that's a bad way to read the Bible, right? So that's why we're zooming back into the story. And because the whole point is that, is Israel going to forget? Answer, yes. Is Israel going to follow other gods? Yes. Is Israel called to obey the terms of the covenant? Are they going to obey? No. And so that's where all of this leads forward to Jesus and to the cross, where he becomes the one faithful Israelite who actually loves the Father, so much so that he lives a life of complete obedience to Torah, and yet he absorbs the curses and the punishment for failing to obey the covenant. He actually takes on behalf of Israel and on behalf of humanity for us. So when you read a line like this, what it should make us think about is the fact that I forget all the time and worship other gods and am proud, and instead of getting covenant curses, I get the offer of forgiveness and grace because Jesus took the covenant curses for me. Does that make sense? So just when we read Deuteronomy, you always have to think within that broader storyline, or else you're going to walk away thinking, oh, Jesus is going to kill me if I don't thank him for my job today. But no, that's not at all. So let's leave this aside. This is very powerful. Chapter 7 is focusing on this. There's always this external pressure and threats from our culture that is pressuring us to accept a value system that compromises our calling as God's holy people. And the whole point is because Jesus has done this for me, he's opened up a new way for me to be a human being that doesn't have to live and operate according to the value system that I used to have. And so all of a sudden my holiness, my personal moral commitment to holiness isn't just about like me making the baby Jesus smile. That's not what it's about. He's already smiled on me because he did this for me. My personal holiness becomes a part of my mission as one form that I witness to the people around me that there's another way to be a human being. It's the upside down way of the kingdom of God. And I'm called to take that seriously as a part of the people of God. And then chapter 8 is then focusing on this kind of internal character issue of how I think about my life and how easy it is to become apathetic and to either become embittered because I'm in a difficult lean season and I'm like, why God? And then you have to, go to your knees in prayer and wrestle with God about, am I in the wilderness right now? And if so, why? What are you trying to teach me in this season? And then if I'm in a season of abundance, it's about constantly making sure that I engage in these practices and habits to remind me that everything is a gift. Everything that I have is a gift. Otherwise, my heart becomes proud and forgetful. So, dude, there's a lot of really good stuff here. Moses is a good preacher, isn't he? He knows how to bring the hammer. So let's close the word of prayer.